So, hello, welcome everybody to this BSR Electric Final Conference panel discussion number 2. We will talk about implementation of electrified commercial vehicles and charging infrastructure in Europe in the future. We are waiting for our panelists to join, and I think we have 5 of them joining. Perfect, thank you. Excellent. I can tell you that the weather here in Gothenburg is totally marvelous. It's very warm. It's light. The nights are very bright. It's midsummer in Sweden at its very best. And therefore, I'm really sad that we can't meet you all from the BSR Electric project here in Gothenburg. It would have been totally wonderful to show you our city just a week like this one. But we all know the circumstances, and I'm extremely proud that the team could change this mutual COVID problem into a possibility. And thus, we also become even more open to the world. More people could join the webinar. The team behind this conference found a conference solution together on very short notice, very short period of time, with people they never met before. And your learning curve has been totally dramatic. And I think that is very, very well done in a short period of time. So thank you very much for this, all people involved. We can change behavior when we have to, and we do collaborate in a good way when it's necessary. And that is something very nice to take with us into the electrification of the transport system. The area of electromobility has been developing very rapidly. Magnus Karlström told us in his keynote that China is leading the way when it comes to buses, for example, and hosts approximately 80% of the fleet. In Europe, the Netherlands has now got the largest fleet, and other countries are upscaling, and also other kind of vehicles are following. And we realize that CO2 standard plays a crucial role in this, but we also need thousands of charging points for heavy-duty trucks to be able to run the vehicle at all. So I think the million-dollar question right now is, will the market provide the charging? Will there be solid business models for this? Or does society need to play a role in this to be able to upscale? And if the society need to play a role, will there be financial incentives to do so? Also, would the battery technology be the most sustainable choice for Europe, or are other technologies more sustainable? Will they follow, like fuel cells, hydrogen, etc.? And what can we predict will happen? And what kind of measures are crucial to enable this transition, this socio-technical regime shift from fossil fuels in the transport sector? There are so many questions. I'm quite eager to discuss these with the great panelists that we have here today. And when I just put up all these questions, I realized that there is need for a BSR Electric 2.9, isn't there? But first, welcome the panelists. So could you please tell us something about yourself and your role in this transition? And we start with you, Robert. Welcome from TTMO.
Good afternoon, Marlon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can hear and see me well. I'm having to use my mobile phone there because the old technology we use in the commission doesn't allow me to use my computer to contact you. I'm very jealous that you've got lovely weather in Gothenburg, but that we can't be there. Looking at the photograph of the tram behind you makes me very nostalgic for the couple of occasions I've had the privilege to visit you. But so about myself, so I'm head of unit for research here in DG Move in the European Commission. Obviously, the European Commission, you know, DG Move, we're the Transport Directorate General. And my job specifically, I see as the sort of liaison between research and policy, because we have a large pot of money currently Horizon 2020 to be Horizon Europe as from next year, which is for spending on research issues. DG Move, we're responsible for transport policy at the EU level, and therefore specifically my role is to have research that is linked to policy needs and policy goals there. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Stella.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Stella. I'm very glad to be with you today, even though it has to be from home and it cannot be in Gothenburg. I'm located right now in Copenhagen, and I'm working for the String network, which is a political cross-border organization. I'm the project coordinator there and work a lot with our alternative fuels agenda. And the organization String consists of 7 regions and cities from Hamburg to Oslo, and we are representing an area of 12.8 million inhabitants. And our vision, actually as outlined in our 2030 strategy, is actually to create an internationally acknowledged mega region fostered by a clean green economy and connected through sustainable infrastructure like for e-mobility. So this is kind of what we are working with and where our focus is.
Welcome, Stella. Really happy you are here with us today. And Jenny, who are you?
Hello from Oslo. My name is Jenny Skagestad. I work for the Norwegian environmental organization called Zero. We are working exclusively with promoting climate solutions, mainly to the Norwegian context, but also sometimes abroad, like here. Very happy to be part of this panel. My role in Zero is to promote electrification of the transportation sector, and I'm especially focused on the role of the local level, the municipalities, cities, counties, and especially their role in the public procurement of electric vehicles and how they can actually be a big driver for the market for electric vehicles.
Important question, really. Martina, welcome.
Hello. Good evening. Good evening. It's not there yet. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Martina Wikström. I'm from the Swedish Energy Agency, and I'm normally not this fancy with these headphones. My normal ones are here, but they broke, so I borrowed my kids' headphones.
I love them.
But I work at the Swedish Energy Agency, and we are the national authority here in Sweden for energy policy issues, but also the energy-related transport research, innovation, and business development. And that's sort of where our strength is, that we do the research, we do the business development, we also do the policy issues, and also the statistics of energy use in Sweden. So we also keep track of the transition. I did a keynote this morning about a project that I'm involved with, but we also work in several different corporations, both Nordic, international as well. That was a little bit about me.
Yeah, thank you, Martina. I'm happy you're with us. Per, from next door.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having this great arrangement with the webinar. So my name is Per Österström, and I work as head of transport and automotive at Business Region Göteborg. And for this webinar and panel, I'm invited as being one of the coordinating functions in the city of Gothenburg for the overall efforts towards the conversion towards the electrified transport system, and where we're dealing with everything from energy supplies to electric vehicles, transportations, public procurement, and everything in between. So thank you very much.
I'm glad to have you, Per. And we will go through with questions to all the panelists. And we start with you, Jenny from Oslo. I think Norway has come very far in the transition to electric vehicles, especially when it comes to cars. And you are also pointed out as a role model. You also have had quite large public investments and a strong political willingness. Do you believe that what you have been doing in Oslo and your model is replicable for the rest of Europe and for other sectors in Norway?
Yes, absolutely. I would say that the success story that we have in Norway with electric mobility has been like a long journey for maybe 20 years and strong incentives both locally and nationally. But it's actually doable for every city and every country to promote the electric vehicles. And especially now that the market has developed so that the electric vehicles are now much more available. There are much more models. They have longer range. It's a lot of more producers that produce all the different kinds of electric vehicles. So compared to 10, 15 years ago when the electric car revolution started in Norway, it's a completely different world. So at the moment today, I think it's possible for everyone to look into and promote locally and nationally the electrification of transportation. We also see that the prices are going down. In the brilliant lecture given by Magnus Karlström in this conference, he also told about how the prices have gone down on the electric buses, and also on the predictions and analysis from Bloomberg New Energy, which they also say that the electric cars will be competitive with combustion engine cars by 2025. And then, since the electric vehicles are so much better in so many ways, no noise or little noise, and no local air pollution, no climate gas emissions, and very much more efficient energy use, then if it's also competitive price-wise, of course it will take over the market. And everything that all countries and cities can do now to help this transition will actually make it go quicker and quicker.
So are there any, I mean, the benefits are quite obvious, more silent cities. Are there any difficulties or hindrances or bad sides of the electrification story that you have learned from what was happening in Oslo? Negative effects that you didn't really think about from the beginning?
No, of course, an organization like mine, we want to contribute to cut all the climate gas emissions. So the only negative thing I see is that it's not going quick enough. So we know that from the Paris Agreement that we have to cut the climate gas emissions worldwide by 50% in 10 years. And the electrification of transport is one of the biggest solutions to that. So I would say that the speed we need is not present everywhere. In Norway, the role of the cities and the counties and the municipalities is really, really important in the electrification now. So if we do not focus on the personal cars, but go into the heavy vehicles like buses and ferries, and also trucks like garbage trucks and light and heavy vans, I would say that the cities and municipalities are the front runners. Because they're actually demanding zero-emission solutions in their public procurement. And I would say that the public procurement is now the most important driver for the electrification of heavier vehicles. We've also seen the start of the electrification of the construction machinery. You know that it's going on in Gothenburg too, and there's a pilot project with a zero-emission construction site in Oslo that is claimed to be the world's first, but please prove me wrong if you know of anyone else. We would like this competition. So I would say that the starting to demand in every procurement that the cities are doing, and also, of course, the state government, they are lagging behind in Norway. The cities are doing better than the state government, but it's a huge potential to speed up the electrification by the procurement system. Also from the buses and the ferries, they are big tenders. So it's kind of changing a whole bus system and a ferry system. But on the delivery vans aspect, it's been harder to do the electrification quickly because we don't have one big procurement from the cities, for instance. Every time a city is ordering books for a school or food for a canteen, they're mainly focusing on the product and not on the transportation of the product. So it's really important now to be able to speed up also the delivery vans and the trucks, that they also demand that the delivery should be emission-free. And we've seen also some of the films from Gothenburg that you have the Stadsleveransen that are actually doing this more efficient and also electric. And that's a really smart way that all cities should learn from.
Yes. But I think there is a question. In the earlier panel, we had this discussion about being a front runner, being an early adapter. That comes with some technical difficulties, and there must be political will and also the opportunity to make failures. And how's the debate in Norway and Oslo about citizens or cities, regions spending tax money on new technology, which actually also have its problems? Are there any discussion about that? Because we find it in Gothenburg sometimes.
Especially this spring, it's been a discussion about the ferries, because investing in zero-emission ferries is a bit more expensive than to buy the normal diesel ferries. So there's been this debate who should pay for this transition cost.
Yeah.
Because of course the operation of the ferries, and that's the same for the buses, it will be less expensive because it's more energy efficient and the electricity is not that expensive. But of course to do the upfront investment is quite heavy, and also for the infrastructure. So there's been a discussion now about who's going to pay for this first cost. And there's going to be a mix, like a combination, both counties, cities, and the states going to pay together, so that it's possible to do this transition. Because of course it's a bit more expensive now, and we have to realize that it's competing with the money that the cities have for schools and healthcare and stuff like that. So it's really important to value that it's actually more expensive, but it's actually just an investment cost. And once we've done this transition, it's a better and less costly system. So
that's a really good conclusion. Thank you, Jenny and Martina. You heard your key presentation, and if anybody haven't, you just go on the web page and listen. That's one of the brilliance with the web formats, isn't it? Well, you said, and we also think about this in the city of Gothenburg, that however silent or clean electric vehicles are, they still take up space, they still use energy. So how can we stimulate the uptake of electric vehicles without increasing the number of vehicles and miles traveled? And you also talk about strategically govern of public space and of parking. Will you tell something about this?
I can start with sort of the Swedish approach to our climate goal in 2045. We're going to be net emission free, and we have an intermediate target for then fossil free vehicle fleet at 2030. And when we look at this, we of course need electrification, but we also need to have quite a lot of biofuels. But more importantly, we also need a more transport efficient society. So we need to sort of bring all these three pieces together and to sort of have a policy framework which allows each technology, or in the sense of a transport efficient society, sort of have their part in this transition as well. So I would say we sort of focus, when we say zero emission in Sweden, we mean zero fossil emissions. So that's sort of interesting too. So when we work with cities, we need to sort of, as Jenny also mentioned, sort of keep track of that these investments, they lead to that we reduce the use of fossil fuels. And today some technologies are more or less expensive, and sort of this is also a pathway where on national level you can assist the pathway and support that. but it's also difficult to sort of, you can have pilot projects and demonstration in cities. Cities are great for that, and we see a lot of people working in the cities that enjoys this type of development and research projects, and it brings a lot of good knowledge down in the city. But sort of the basic functionality of the city needs to be sort of boring, money efficient in their sort of investments, and as long as it's sort of fossil free, the Swedish framework wants to stimulate that. But with the role of sort of bringing up public space is really important, because when you look at different sort of vision pictures of the sustainable city in the future, you see pedestrians, you see cyclists, but you don't see any road transports at all. Maybe so. We sort of have to bring that to the people that works in this sustainable society community, that you will have different types of vehicles there to sort of bring people and goods in and out of the city.
Yeah.
And we see this. I work a lot with charging infrastructure, and my keynote was about this. And it is sort of a tension between the public space and the private investments here. And that's why I urge for everyone to sort of think twice before you bring in sort of private capital within the cities to build at parking spaces. And we see the same thing again. 10 years ago, we started with light-duty vehicles. Now again, with heavy-duty commercial vehicles, we see the same sort of demand for chargers for these trucks in the city, where we also know that these trucks will probably not use them because they can't rely on having public charging during their operations, in that sense, where they need to park and they sort of have to think twice. So we just try to sort of comment on that, so we don't build charging infrastructure in narrow streets, at least, because we see that the people in the cities, they don't really necessarily want more parked cars in their streets.
And you also say that the parking space is a marketplace for charging services.
Yeah.
And I think that was a brilliant way of putting it. And if the parking space is a marketplace, should like cities and public sector do their business on that marketplace? Or but there are also a lot of other private owned parking spaces around in the city, and how can we stimulate that kind of marketplace?
Exactly. In that sense that the city has another energy company that provides other fuels, they could sort of have that. There are the city of Gothenburg has a public utility company, but the city themselves, they're not an energy provider. They provide societal services, but not necessarily electrons to a parked car. And there are plenty of good ways to sort of work with public. If a city wants to sort of stimulate the uptake of electric vehicles, it's much easier and perhaps more cost efficient to sort of work through their public parking companies, housing companies, to sort of build rather more off-street parking for citizens living in their public houses, and also parking in their garages. And there sort of you do it as a part of their business, not as a part. And of course, these investment decisions can be taken into account a little bit more long term, but it still has to be decided and to sort of act as a market player on the market.
Yeah, I think these are questions and perspectives that we really need to discuss, because it will give us the long-term effects in cities. But when it comes to heavy duty and heavier traffic, Martina,
here we see, for example, heavy-duty vehicles. We see, of course, buses as the main example of as something that operates in the city. And as you're all aware of, the electricity project running in Gothenburg sort of is an interesting project to show on the other benefits that you can't really calculate when you're electrifying the public transport system. It brings new possibilities that you also need to explore, and perhaps someone in the future that works with a number crunching can sort of put an economical price on what an indoor bus stop is actually worth. So you need to do this as well. And then we see the market for heavier duty vehicles are sort of emerging. And we see that there are being built public fast chargers for trucks. And this again is sort of a cooperation, because you need to sort of identify the land, and that land for that charging station perhaps is public, perhaps it's not. And to sort of have this dialogue and sort of understand how you can leverage everyone's effort to sort of come faster to the transition.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Martina. And I would recommend you to listen to Martina's keynote speech also. Stella?
Yes.
Yes, you are on. You wish the String Network wish to be the green investment hub and a leading implementer of sustainable infrastructure to combat climate change. That is really high ambitions, and we are thankful for that. And one of the goals in the String Network towards 2030 is to make the String region a regional green hub. And the question then is, how do you incorporate the electric solutions in your goals, and what do you expect from cities and regions and actors along the String Network, and how can you help us to make progress in this transition?
Yes, thank you. I would say that we support in our work the e-mobility in different ways. You already mentioned the Green Hub initiative. That is actually an initiative where we want to develop the best possible political and economic framework conditions for green tech companies to settle in the region, and also to attract investments, green investments to the region. And that is addressed to the entire green tech sector, and thereby, of course, also to e-mobility. And there we are talking about the production and also the application side. But this is actually only one of our initiatives in how we work. We also are very involved with lobbying for and development of lobbying strategies for alternative fuels, among them, of course, electricity on the national level and on the EU level, where we really try to push this agenda forward. And we also function as a test bed for electric mobility and electric solutions. So we actually initiated the so-called GREAT project, which deployed 29 fast chargers for electric vehicles between Hamburg and Oslo. So it is now actually possible to travel all the way with an EV. So these are different ways in which we work with it. And I think I would also stress the role of regions in this transition. I heard before we talked a lot about the national level and about cities, but I think really regions have an important role in this process, because especially when we are a big region, like the String region, we really have a critical mass to set the agenda and to address different levels with our strategies. So we have to make sure that we take this role upon ourselves, and also that we kind of raise the bar for ambitions, that in a region we can implement and be much faster than, for example, on the national level. So we should be more ambitious and push this bar a little bit higher if we can. And And I think therefore we need to have the right instruments, so to say, and that is also where this cooperation between the different levels comes into play. Because especially the EU, of course, is setting a lot of framework conditions with regulations on the one hand side, but also the different funding schemes that are available. We heard from Robert the Horizon 2020 before, and these are, of course, important tools. And these tools have a lot of potential to actually apply electric mobility. So the regions need to reap these potentials. We have to make sure there's a large share of investments available for electric mobility, and then the regions and cities need to reap this potential and actually develop initiatives that are an answer to this development and that use these investments.
Do you think the regions and cities are on top of their toes to do this, or are they lagging behind and waiting for the best technology solution to come?
Well, I would say that is exactly where I think they are on a very good way, but we can be even better. Like one of the goals of this Green Hub initiative is also a branding exercise, that we actually say, okay, the entire region with all the regional and city members that we have, we are a public organization, I should maybe say that, they have to take this brand and say, okay, we are the Green Hub. We are working with different branches, among them e-mobility, and we are actually front runners in this. And that will, of course, have a huge impact on how we are seen by others, which role we can play, and how far we can set the agenda.
From a city perspective, how can we be sure that we are putting that we are choosing the right technology to come? I mean, it was ethanol a couple of years ago, then the biogas, and everybody was asking us to put up biogas stations, and now it's electrification, it's electric ways, then the battery, and now as soon as we put up the first fast charger for heavy vehicles, then everybody was asking for the hydrogen gas station. So whatever we do, somebody is always asking for the next technology solution, if you see what I mean. So when do we, how can we know that we are ready and that we are putting our money into the best technology, and that we don't invest in something that will be old as soon as we built it?
Yeah. Well, the solution to this challenge, I would say, is really a cross-border cooperation, because we are talking about e-mobility, we are talking about transport, and infrastructure does not stop at national borders. So we have to look across the border to have sustainable and long-term infrastructure systems that we are building. So in this way, we have to talk to our colleagues from across the borders with different stakeholders to make sure that we can analyze the needs of the region correctly. So we really need an overview. What is demanded? What do we need to have in the transport sector? Which characteristics are important? And what we actually work with a lot is on the passenger car side. As I said, we have the GREAT project, because we feel that after comparing the different goals also of our members, for example, that the race there is a bit decided, that on the passenger car side, electric mobility is really strong, and as we also heard before, really has a market case. We feel that, for example, on the side of trucks and heavy-duty transport, it's not really decided yet. There are, as you say, a lot of technologies on the table, and from our analyses until now, we have to say that electricity is a very important solution, but it might not be the one-fits-all solution. Exactly. So we are actually trying now to combine electricity with hydrogen for heavy-duty transport, and try to develop a kind of dual infrastructure strategy to make sure that really all the demands in the regions can be met, and also all the different demands, because as we know, electric mobility on long distances still has some challenges, or you have to put very expensive infrastructure into place with overhead lines, for example, and there hydrogen is a bit more flexible. So we say we need the best of both worlds to go forward. And there I also think that that regions and cities really need to take the torch, so to say, into their hand and say, okay, we are setting the agenda, we are guiding the national level and the EU in terms of which leading technologies they should choose. So we have to take decisions on this side.
Yeah, and I think to be able to do that, everybody's waiting for each other somehow.
Yeah.
So the corridors and the networks and the string network is extremely important to just make us brave enough to decide what's suitable in our region, what kind of puzzle we are making together in this geographic part of Europe. Do you think there will be differences in between the different TNT network links?
Well, I mean, in general, this is of course difficult to predict, but I would assume since all these policy frameworks are run by the EU, that of course they will have a focus on aligning the different technologies that are applied. And of course we have the different corridors like the ScanMed corridor, but they of course, even if there are main lines, they also have to be interlinked. Because especially with road transport, no one can really predict where the passenger car needs to go, or also maybe where the truck needs to go. So in the end, they of course have to be interlinked and based on the same technologies. But I think this is also supported through, I already stressed the value and the necessity of the funding schemes that we have on the national and EU level. They are, of course, also setting certain targets and supporting certain technologies. So this is important to keep in mind for leading the way.
Yeah. And thank you, Stella, for your hard work cooperating or collaborate, making us coming together in this one. Per,
of course.
I also, earlier this morning at the first panel, we were talking about the socio-technology shift that is happening right now, and that a lot of people need to change. It's not only a technology change from a powertrain to another. And you, in your keynote, you were talking about to supporting the skills in this transition. The industry transformation, going from combustion engine to electric. And I think that was a really interesting speech. So please browse and listen to Per at the conference webpage. Will you tell us something more about this? And we also have quite heavy in the morning newspaper, heavy news in this region.
Yeah, the transformation is happening everywhere, as we know. It's a total transformation, both on the passenger car side, buses, heavy vehicles, ferries, electric work sites, all over the place, basically. And this affects, of course, also a lot of the people that are used to be involved in the conventional drivetrain development and the conventional parts of the vehicles. And now we are reskilling or want to reskill thousands of engineers to actually be part of the technical shift and going towards more electrified or hydrogen application solutions. And only in Sweden we have estimated a transformation of about 30 to 40,000 engineers in total that needs to be transformed in their skills. But of course, this is a much huger number of people on the European level, and obviously will affect a lot of jobs. And but it's also an opportunity. If we are brave here and if we are fast, we can also be leading the future on a global competition level. But we really need to take fast steps to be ahead of others, and working together is one of the solutions.
But that means that we don't only need money to put into investments in charging infrastructure to be able to make this transition. We also need financing of of human capital, right?
Exactly, and I think we have through support from European Union here in this financing, and also from a national level, and because everyone sees this situation, and it's about a lot of jobs. It's about growth in the society, and in the long-term perspective, it is also about having public money to funding this transition. So everything is like dependent on each other, and but I think we have a true support, and we have everyone understands the situation and wants to take steps ahead to solve it.
And I know that you at the business region Gothenburg as well are working very closely with companies, and also in different kind of test beds where you try out different solutions. And earlier this morning, when we were talking about buses, we said that Oslo is able to take up the bus technology now because they could borrow a bus from Gothenburg, actually from Västtrafik, and they tested it and they tried it out, and they realized, well, this is really, really good. Will you tell something about this, the meaningfulness of testing and demonstrating?
I think this is, if we look at Gothenburg, I think we are one of the most testbed intense cities in Sweden, and maybe in Northern Europe. We have a lot of different types of test beds, but for example, in the field of electrification, we have electricity as one example of that, where different stakeholders go together with their own questions and problems and solve them together with others, because speaking about electrification, this is kind of a system change that needs to happen. It's not just the vehicle, it's not just the grid infrastructure, it's also the business models and who will be owning what, and the values that comes out from different actors cooperating together. So testbeds are a very good way of actually learning together, finding solutions together, and doing that in a real life situation.
And we heard Per from the EIB in his keynote. He stated that the EU, through the EIB, give us possibilities with cheap and long loans. But I was wondering a bit: is cheap and long loans is that the kind of financial mechanism? Is that an answer to our challenges? If you can turn to the energy agency and to EU through Robert Nissen at this point, what and also to the string network, what would you wish from them? What do you as a region need from them to be able to go through this transition?
Yeah, if I take trucks as an example, which is a huge part of the transportation system in Europe, I think what we have in front of us is a huge build out of green electricity and along with the national and EU road network to support the large scale of charging infrastructure that is required, or for producing hydrogen locally side to side with fast chargers. Also, the ports and the posts and the terminals needs to be equipped and at the pace of the introduction of electrical trucks. I mean, in the beginning, the TCO and the capex will not be in favor of us. The cost and the mileage cost will be a little bit higher than, but in the long run perspective, battery cost and the volume will take down the figures. So I think what we need to have, and we need to have that already from a start, is kind of a smart built out of an infrastructure to make up a system. You can't build a charge point in Gothenburg and the other one in Oslo and think about that as a system. You need to look at the regional level, and then you need to expand that to a national level in the pace that new models are also introduced in the market. In the beginning, we will see more of urban applications, and then the regional applications will come, and then the interregional applications will come. And we need to grow the network of charging infrastructure along with that, and it needs to be built out in a smart way. with the systematic view of what is required on a system level. And I think then the society needs to kick in, the national agencies, but also European Union, to invest in this infrastructure, because I think that is what is required to really get the ball rolling.
Right. Well, turning to you, Robert. Thank you, Per.
Thank you.
Yeah. The broader scale is we talk about the cities, but then it doesn't stop there, because the transport system doesn't stop there.
Mm-hmm.
So and I think that is one of the complexity with this transition, that we need to work on all the scales at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult if one scale get too much ahead of the others, because then you might be on the wrong way, right? So we're always waiting for each other. But that was more a reflection than a question, I realized. But first, we must solve this question first. Is really electromobility a sustainable solution in the whole of Europe, from well to wheel?
Well, the starting point, without question, is that transport, all modes of transport, have to clean up. We note that today transport accounts for about a quarter of our greenhouse gas emissions in Europe, and will soon overtake energy as the biggest polluter. So it's not even open to discussion. As far as the European Commission is concerned, the priority has to be greening of transport, all the modes of transport there. The first point to emphasize is that from the European Commission point of view, we are technology neutral. You mentioned how to make the right decision there when at city level or local level in making choosing what technology to go. European Commission, we don't pretend to be the experts what will be the best mode of transport in 5 years' time, or the best fuel for transport. So we will support research to look at all the various areas, and it will be market driven. Ultimately, the users will decide which technologies are the best. I mean, we can look back at the different models of mobile phone or different models of video recorder, and the market decides ultimately which is the one that's chosen. It may not even be technologically the best solution, but it's the one that's most widely accepted. So the European Commission will never tell it shall be electricity or it shall be hydrogen. In reality, even just for road transport, but certainly for all the modes of transport, there's going to be a blend, because hydrogen will have a role to play. Probably not for cars in urban areas, but for example for lorries or for trains or for ships there. So we have to support all the technologies to a certain degree of maturity. Then the next stage is to try and encourage the necessary infrastructure. Now, it will be nice to say that the European Commission can come along and fund recharging points throughout Europe, or refund the complete overhaul of the vehicle fleets there, but I'm afraid that's not going to happen there. We just don't have the money. Even no matter how big people think the EU's budget is, we can only do pilot projects. Our aim is to be a force multiplier when it comes to spending projects, to be the push that takes research projects beyond that sort of pilot stage into upscaling there. In her presentation there, it was Jenny that mentioned the issue about public procurement. We've tried to help by using the Connecting Europe facility as a means for doing public procurement for hydrogen buses, recognising that it may be expensive for a city to buy 1 or 2 buses in a pilot project, so to try and group together so that a consortium of cities can buy 50 in a public procurement call there. That's a kind of example we can do to set the lead. Also, from a European point of view, we have very much a sort of carrot and stick approach there. The carrot can be we can finance pilot projects. We will invest, we have and will continue to invest lots of money into developing cleaner transport and research there. But also we can have the stick in the sense of setting legislative requirements there to encourage people to do the necessary change, because it's very nice to talk with the Nordic audience here, but you are, so far advanced in your thought processes. I mean, we're all jealous of what Norway can achieve there. Obviously, you're a relatively rich, relatively population small country there, and so to compare what you can do with what Bulgaria or Romania can do in the European Union, it is in a different league there, and so sometimes we also need the stick approach to force people to go down a legislative direction there to set standards. I mean, in that regards, on electrification or charging points, we already adopted in 2014 the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive, which obliges member states to develop a minimum infrastructure network for electricity, compressed gas, liquefied gas, and also hydrogen there. To be perfectly honest, it's been something of a failure or a disappointment there, because it's not been effective enough. So we are now in the process of revising that legislation, and we'll come forward with a proposal probably next year, if not this year, for a strengthened Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive, because we need that stick to force those member states that drag their feet into investing more money into the infrastructure. So, say from a European Commission point of view, we can never do enough, because obviously the size of the EU is so great, and I say our budget is limited. Our aim is to be a sort of force multiplier and encourage best practices and encourage cooperation between cities and regions there. The TEN-T network, we would like to do more on the TEN-T network as a pilot to encourage new technologies, to see that they work, encourage the funding there. I can certainly say that in the discussions that we're doing now for developing Horizon Europe, which will be the successor program to Horizon 2020 starting next year, when it comes to zero emission vehicles, and well, first of all, again, let's just go back to the statistics. When we talk about emissions from transport, road transport still accounts for 70% of the emissions. So that's the priority area. Aviation and maritime about 15% each. So whilst we can all condemn the amount of aircraft that are flying around, the reality is it's still road transport that has the most to improve. Yes. So in that regards, in the Horizon Europe, we have said that the priority action should be spending more money on research into having zero emission lorries and zero emission long distance coaches there, because we believe that cars, urban buses, the technology is there. It can be improved. There will be more money for developing the next generation of batteries to make these vehicles cheaper, of course. There'll be more money also on hydrogen in general. But specifically, the priority, we want to see a priority from the automotive sector to look at research into zero emission lorries, not low emission, zero emission lorries, and zero emission long distance coaches, and of course industrial vehicles as well. It's a very much a specialist market, but if you can make a 60-ton semi-trailer combination zero emission, then it should be relatively easy to make a commercial, another industrial vehicle zero emission as well. So I think, Marlon, that's my opening remarks there from an EU perspective.
Yeah, but I think it's also very important that you tell us black on white that you will not choose the technology for us. We need to do that ourselves. And I mean, that's a message. Then we don't need to wait for you. But I must stress how utterly important the CO2 standards are. That kind of legislation is really a trigger, stick and a carrot for the whole transport sector. Yeah. So that kind of, without that kind of standards, we are not going anywhere. No, so please keep up that work.
No, I absolutely agree there. As I say, for things like emission standards, it's a no-brainer. I mean, on more technical issues there, again, it's slightly boring, but just as essential that there's a standardized design of plug, whether it's the electric plug or the refiller for hydrogen there. If they're not compatible, then it won't work as a concept there. So the European Commission with the blessing, of course, of member states and industry can easily set standards there. But again, please don't forget, part of our difficulty always is we've got to get consensus with 27 member states, and very seldom we can progress at the speed of the fastest states on anything there. We can be the conscience and propose the things in Brussels, but at the end of the day, it needs the 27 as a whole to agree on the speed that we progress on standards.
Yeah. But I mean, the standards is creating a fair playing field. What do you say? Fair level.
Yeah, level playing field.
Yeah, thank you. Well, time is running out, and I hate that because I would love to talk to you for hours and hours. And that's the bad thing about the web conference, that we can't go for beer afterwards.
Yeah.
But just we have one final question, I think. And we will use this thumb gallop, the social media gallop. So panelists, use your thumb. So if you agree, you just pull it up, and if you disagree, you pull it down. I think we are entering era of greener mobility with electric vehicles, and I think we all stated that this is not a question of if we are, it's a question of how rapidly this system change will happen. And hopefully this upstart will come soon, and that it also will boost the electrification in Europe. Just like the COVID crisis boosted digital meetings, like the one we had these days. But I wonder, do you actually think that the upstart will boost electrification, or do you think that this COVID situation will be negative for the electrification transition? Panelists, use your thumb. Yeah, you can do it that way. I'm not really sure. So, Jenny, 3 thumbs up and 2 a little bit more uncertain. Well, I definitely hope that we will have the thumbs up.
I would say it depends what you make out of it.
Another question then. Speaking from your organizations, I think the transition towards electrification, just during the 2019, there were a different sound in the discussions. The sense of urgency was pressing, and more people got involved in this issue. It used to be some kind of sustainable mobility issue, but now it's actually a transition, and more people realize that. Are you experiencing the same in your organizations? Or do you still meet a lot of people that don't really get the clue, and then the thumb down? Did you understand the question? Yeah. It's thumb up. The sense of urgency for electrification have increased. We have 2 minutes left, and I'm not certain if I can leave the word to you panelists, but I trust you to be really, really short. Stella, something last you want to tell to the BSR Electric participants and followers?
Yes, I think this was a very interesting discussion, and I would say 2 important points I would like to stress are: one thing, we need cross-border transport plans with focus on alternative fuels, and we need the public procurement together with the public funding that the regions then can use to implement something for e-mobility.
Thank you, Stella. Jenny, 10 seconds.
So no one would like to go back to a diesel-polluted city, I'm sure. So please find your examples and spread the enthusiasm of all the great stuff about non-polluting transportation, and use humor, culture, thanks to passengers, and really get a dialogue going, and then the politicians will be eager to do more, and then finally we'll succeed and cut all the emissions from transport.
Thank you, Jenny. Martina, will you use 10 seconds just to send a short message, final message?
Yes, short message then from the Energy Agency. Electricity will not be an issue. Don't worry about that.
Excellent. Per, you got 10 seconds.
Yes, I think now when we kickstart the industry, let's make sure that any rescue plans or EU Green Deal will involve electromobility and infrastructure build out.
Robert.
I'm very optimistic that the technology will develop and that it will clean zero-emission transport is the future, but we must not be dogmatic there, because if we start insisting people can't use their old cars, then you lose public support. So the technology will come, but be pragmatic in how it's forced on people.
Thank you, dear panelists, for this hour. Thank you, BSR Electric, for this project and for this web meeting. Thank you, the conference team. I wish you all a really, really nice midsummer weekend. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for inviting me.